Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Patience Ogunbona here. Welcome to another exciting episode of Inspiration to Achieve, where I share inspiration to help you move from a place of aspiration into transformation and to inspire others as well. I help you by providing insights so that you can achieve your life and business goals and go ahead and thrive in life. This is the first inspiration to achieve for the month of April. And I'm excited today because today I'm bringing to you a topic that is close to my heart and a topic that will I can share with you on my lived experience and some of the strategies that I use to achieve success or to move forward and make progress in my life. So I am excited about this today. And I want to welcome you to joining me this time and for us to share together. So connect with me and make sure that you make comments. And when you watch this later on as a replay, I hope that you can hashtag replay and can share your insights as well. So today, I'm talking about developing trust and vulnerability as an introvert. So why as an introvert? Because I am one. And when I talk about lived experience, I will be sharing with you from that lived experience. But also, I am known as the visionary introverted woman. So I work with other introverted women to help them overcome areas of lack of self belief in themselves, overthinking, procrastination, and perfectionism so that they can go ahead and develop the life that they want. So, this is why this topic is close to my heart, but it's also relating to introverts. Does that mean that extroverts will not gain anything out of it? The answer is no, you will gain a lot out of it as well. You gain a lot of insights. You also probably see some of these things in yourself because, as they say, there is no pure introvert or pure extrovert. That would be, apparently, some people say that would be somebody who is probably loony. So basically, we have different spectrums of introversion and extroversion. So you will find that this applies to many people that will be listening to me. Of course, my audience is also a mixed audience. So I am excited today to bring you this topic on developing trust and vulnerability as an introvert. So, we want to start by defining for you today the fact that trust is the currency of relationships. I want you to hold that thought in your mind. Trust is the currency of relationships. The second thing is if you followed me for a while on my program, on my live sessions, you will realize that I always start with a question. And the reason is I want you to tune in to be able to glean from what I say the answers to the question that I ask. Because your brain straight away goes when you ask a question. Hi, Temi, thank you for joining me. So, when you ask a question, straight away your brain goes around looking for the answer to that question. And therefore, I want you to be able to tune into this and gain value by also engaging through looking at answering the question for yourself. So I'm just doing a quick technical check to make sure that I'm coming live as I should, which I am. So we want to talk today about this topic, but I want you to dwell on your own question as well as you gain the insight. So what's the question I want to ask you? The question I want to ask you is related to the fact that we are responsible for our success or failure. And being able to take responsibility for that in an informed way is important. Therefore, the question today for you is, do you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself? And if you did trust yourself, what possibilities will this open up for you? So I want you to dwell on that question. If you trusted on yourself in yourself, what possibilities will that hold for you? First, remember that trust is the currency of relationships. And so if you did trust yourself, what possibilities would that trust hold for you? And do you definitely do trust yourself? So we want to start, and I want you to stick with me so that you can get insights to be able to answer that question in a more objective and effective way. So stick with me here. I want to talk about trust and define trust much more clearly. So trust, the definition of trust that I like says trust is defined as the firm belief and confidence in the reliability, integrity, trust, and ability of someone or something. So, do you like that definition? I love that definition because it has a few key elements: reliability, integrity, truth, and ability. So, ability is when you can make that move to trust somebody. Okay. So, but then with trust, with needing to trust, comes the permission to allow yourself to be vulnerable. So that's where the vulnerability element comes to play, you know? And so let's talk about vulnerability for a little bit. What is it? So, vulnerability, again, a definition that I like, is the quality of being easily hurt or attacked. It can be part and parcel of the framework or of a system. So, as we well know, our body, our makeup, our genealogy is a system. So when I say that I'm linking this to introverts, for example, I'm saying that the introvert can find themselves feeling more vulnerable perhaps than the extrovert. Why? Another way to look at vulnerability is being sensitive. And you hear a lot of people say introverts are highly sensitive. And it's because of the way we are wired, to take things in and to do and to think about things deeply. And introverts tend to experience the world in a deep way. They try to find meanings from things around them. So, how does that play? Why an extrovert can brush off things, whistle away, oblivious, and move on to the next thing because they are very speedy in the way, even in relationships on the go. The introvert is taking in behaviors, is taking in maybe facial expressions, some of which are not meant to be what they are thinking it is, but they take all these things in. And when you as an introvert takes all these things in, or the incidents, the words, it begins to paralyze and cause increased withdrawal. So that is where you think about vulnerability. When you think about a computer system, for example, they say is vulnerable to attack. So that means there's high risk that people can attack it, can put in viruses into it. What do you do in that instance? You begin to find ways of mitigating the risk of people being able to hack it, being able to get into it. So, in the same way, when you have issues with trust, it can come from a place of feeling really vulnerable. And so, part of the mechanism that you would use as an introvert to protect yourself is to ensure that you put in place things that will not allow your vulnerable or system, to be compromised. And so that is why people can struggle with this when they are introverts more than when you are an extrovert. So basically, yesterday I shared the fact that every year for the last 8 years, I come up with a keyword. The idea being that I recognize areas of growth in my life, and I want to use that keyword as a framework to be able to develop strategies to get the results that I want. So I recognize a growth area. I understand this growth area from a place of self awareness. And then I take responsibility with a willingness to grow and get the results that I want. What does this mean? This means, therefore, that when I select the keyword, it's very important and I focus on it. So this Facebook or LinkedIn Live, or the session that I'm sharing today with you, this live session today is coming from a place of reviewing the last quarter and what I have done with my keyword. And obviously, my keyword is trust. So hence why the topic today is developing trust and vulnerability as an introvert, because I've reviewed and I want to share with you my lived experience and some of the things I've learned. So, aside from it being a keyword, I've broken it down into 3 areas where I feel that trust is important for me. And these 3 key areas are: one, trusting God. First, because as a person of faith, I need to trust God. I need to trust in His promises, and I need to trust in his ability to help me and provide divine protection and support for whatever I desire to do. And the truth about it is, at some point in my life last year, I just felt like I wasn't doing that enough. So it became a key area of focus. The second one was trust myself to make decisions and follow through. When you're like myself and very self driven and self motivated, it is possible that you do trust yourself and therefore can make and follow through with the decisions you make, but you have to make the decisions in the first place. And one of the things I notice is that when you are an introvert, you tend to think a lot and overthink things. Therefore, you would not make quick decisions. But if you trust yourself, decision making becomes quicker and you can then follow through when you trust yourself. So the third one is trusting people. I found that, life happens and then you find yourself realizing that you're not really trusting of people as you should be trusting of people to be able to have the right kind of relationships. So when you think about it, the first one, which is trusting God, and the last one, which is trusting people, is not something, it's partly because these are elements that you can't control. You can't control God, you can't control people. So there's always a resistance to trust in areas where you can't control the outcomes or you can't control people. Well, how about the second one? It was also very important. Why? Because I recognize that when I review failure, it becomes like a reminder of where you did not maybe follow through and get the results you want. And if you listen to the inner critic, it tends to undermine your resolve to do things because it reminds you of the failures in the past. That's what fear does. Fear and the inner critic are kind of like brothers, and they would share conversations together and say, let's try and stop her from the hurt and the pain that she's had in the past from doing these things. So you find yourself not trusting yourself to make that leap. So, since trust is the currency for relationships, if you mistrust God, for example, you cannot pray and feel that He will keep His promises. No matter how much you know those promises by head, you have to know them by heart. And it's with the heart that many times we move and we make decisions. And so, if in the past you've prayed and your prayers haven't been answered, and you take that as the main truth, then you would struggle to let yourself trust God. The second one is if you've been involved, which is trusting yourself, is if you find yourself that you haven't completed projects in the past and you haven't delivered as you should deliver to achieve the results that you want. This can be due to certain factors, such as your relationship with yourself. Since trust is a currency of relationship, how is your relationship with yourself? Does your inner critic overshadow your ability to be proud of yourself? So, by defining yourself by your past, low self esteem, and maybe lack of awareness of your potential. So, and if you don't trust yourself, guess what? You won't invest in yourself. You won't take you won't take decisions to take risks, because I remember that when I first started on this journey, one of the phrases that my mentors used to use in the John Maxwell team was bet on yourself. Bet on yourself. So if you're going to bet on yourself, if you're going to feel that you are worth taking a risk on, you definitely have to trust yourself. And so this might be coming from the fact that you don't have that healthy inner self-image. This is how you look at, trusting yourself. Do I have that healthy self-image of myself? Who do I see when I look in the mirror? Who do I see when I look at others, and what are they projecting back to me based on how I feel from the inside? This will determine how you trust yourself. The next one obviously is people, trusting people. You learn to trust people, but then they hurt you. And when they hurt you and you suffer disappointments, you suffer abuse, you suffer degradation, This can define your ability to trust people. It can define your approach to the relationships with others. Because you've been hurt in the past, you want to protect yourself. You want to keep yourself away from getting hurt ever again. So what do? You decide not to trust people. So these are some of the things that, when I reviewed why did I make trust a key word for myself, this was the reason. It was because I knew in my heart that it was important to work on these areas, trusting God, trusting myself, trusting people. Why? Because linked to my mission and vision, one of my core values is freedom. So I have 5 pillars, which I call my core 5 value pillars. And the major one that drives what I do as a transformational coach, as a corporate and business trainer, as one that works with people, is freedom. And for me to really, really experience freedom, I feel like trust is foundation, because I also love connecting with people. So that's the other side. The introverted woman or the introvert loves deep connections with people. However, all these things and lack of trust and feeling vulnerable can make them withdraw, can make you as an introvert withdraw, and therefore those deep connections become impossible. So it's important that these deep connections are built, because it makes you feel whole as a person and it makes you feel complete. Whether you're an introvert or extrovert, relationships are important. So, what are some of the ways that I handled this? This is what I want to share with you. Focused on some key areas. So, first, I understood why. So, based on this, I asked myself, why don't I trust God? Why don't I trust myself? Why don't I trust people? When you do that, when you ask yourself why, so it's not just, it's about find the why. So it's not just about finding the why of why you need to do something. It's also finding the why of why you're not doing something, basically. So why am I not trusting enough as I feel I want to trust? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. And I love this, the best person, who talks about vulnerability a lot, Brene Brown. She says that vulnerability is not weakness, it is our greatest measure of courage. So basically, as someone who has had to move past feeling vulnerable to a place where she, in public talks about weaknesses and everything, she understands this better. That is our greatest measure of courage. Therefore, I had to ask myself why, and then I had to understand, start understanding my level of vulnerability, because I wanted to actually, based on understanding that, how do I allow myself and give myself permission to be vulnerable? And I think that's important for all of us to do. So the second thing I did was to count the cost of lack of trust in whether myself, whether God, whether people. And as John Maxwell says, I'm a John Maxwell certified transformational coach. And I love his books, I love his words and the quotes. And he says that all of us have to recognize our leadership lead. And this is where you think about, what price am I paying for lack of trust? Because if trust is actually the currency of relationships, where do you want to step to that next level, which would require you perhaps to lead yourself first and lead others? Then you've got to understand, what's the lead, what's the cap, what's the level, what's my vulnerability, and therefore, so what are you missing as a result of that? You can't up level when you don't know where the lead is. So it's understanding what exactly the cost is for not building trust. And based on, so starting to look at all of these, I had to, live, realize that I wanted to lift my leadership lead. I had a vision of impacting lots and lots of other introverted women. So you had to conquer whatever it is in your life that is holding you back from leading others that you want to lead, that you want to be an example and inspiration to. And also, I recognize that because of maybe trust, you'd not be willing to ask for help when you need help because you don't trust that people will help you. So it's important, and it became important for me to look at that and then to work on it. So in working on it, I had to accept a couple of truths. So four to be precise. And that was, I accepted some truths that I already knew, but maybe was sitting on the boundaries of accepting them to be able to trust. I had to accept that God is faithful, since I needed to trust God first, and his promises are sure. And there are things we can't change in life. So acceptance and faith hold the key to living a fulfilled life. That's one thing one truth I had to accept. I had to accept that as a truth, as a foundation to trust God. Because faith, as they say, is the assurance of things hoped for and things that you can't yet see. So you have to trust that the promises are going to be fulfilled. Because the truth about it is, life happens and things happen, and life is designed in a way. We're not meant to live here forever, and things will not always go the way we want. So it's trusting that the promises that we desire can still be achieved. What about the next one? What about trusting people? So, trusting people, I had to take this truth on board that there are good people in the world, and there are good people who courageously do good and open their hearts to doing good. People with great positive values. This is very fundamental in being able to trust, because you might have been hurt by people, and so you think everybody is like that, but that's not the truth. But aside from that, I needed to step into a place of saying, I am that person that can be trusted. So I am a good person, but I needed to work on myself so that I delivered good to the world as well. So, same thing with you. Listening to this, watching this is the same approach. Are you a good person? And therefore, there'll be more of you in the world that can deliver the good you're looking for. So, that's a fundamental truth. But it's also a fundamental truth that there are negative people whose outlook on life is negative, and who have a default of hurting others because they themselves have been hurt. I heard the phrase many years ago that really impacted me, and it said, hurting people hurt people because it's their default position. They've been hurt and they've lived in a situation of being hurt. So they hurt people. They don't know how else to be. So there are people like that. And also because they have not dealt properly with the hurt and addressed it to understand the impact it's had on their personality and who they are. And then there are also people in the world who operate from a place of fear and therefore will oppress others in order to control them to do what they want. Or people who have negative values and choose to be blind to it. People who refuse to grow from their mistakes and as a result make more mistakes, some of which will impact on your life. Accepting this as a fundamental truth, because you can't escape living in the human race, which is a mixture of good and bad. So if you accept this as a fundamental truth, it should help you to say, I am going to move forward despite having met someone like this, because I am heading towards finding people that are good. I'm also will work to be a good person to attract good people into my life. I want you to remember as well that man is ultimately selfish, and it takes a lot of courage to be selfless. So you will find that people have their own agenda and live by their own agenda. That shouldn't stop you from being selfless, of learning to be selfless, to be courageously selfless. That then says, what about for you? What other fundamental fact did I have to face about myself that was important to be able to trust myself? Is the fact that I'm human, that I'll make mistakes. And when I make those mistakes, it doesn't mean that I'll make mistakes the next time, because you can harvest from your mistakes and you can learn. So for you, I want you to recognize your humanity, because within it, there is default of being vulnerable, whether introvert or extrovert. Of course, I've explained that introverts tend to feel more vulnerable for a reason, but and be more aware of their vulnerability and therefore withdraw more often than the extrovert would. However, you must recognize that for yourself, you're a human, you make mistakes, and mistakes show that you have tried something, and therefore you can learn from that and move to try something else. You have failed at something shows that you have tried it, shows that you have stepped over resisting procrastination, resisting perfectionism, and gone and done it. Therefore, you have the opportunity to now glean what it is that is in there and fix it. You are more likely to trust yourself when you do that than when you don't. So if you're not learning from your mistakes and you're making it over and over again, which sometimes we do because again, we're human, we forget. We forget. You know, they say that if a pregnant woman could remember all the pain she went through, she would never give birth again. Not that that is a mistake, but you get where I'm going with this. So the truth about it is, I have coined the phrase that I've used a lot more often. And the phrase is, I offer myself grace. So when I've done something, I offer myself grace. So what's the other thing that has made me pursue trust? Is the fact that my style of leadership is service and servant leadership. Leadership is very trust is very fundamental and important in leadership. Therefore, with the type of leadership that I want, which is servant and service leadership, I operate and aspire to be one that wants to trust people, to give them the freedom and independence to fail forward and to achieve on their own terms and to do things and learn from it. So that can make me as a leader vulnerable. Therefore, what do? I have to train myself in leadership skills that allow me to wholeheartedly serve, that allow me to wholeheartedly serve and maintain and protect this freedom space for others that I serve and I provide service for. So that means trusting people, whether or not, coming from a place of unconditional trust. It's one quality that a coach has to have is unconditional belief. So hence you see why it's important that I develop trust, because unconditional belief cannot happen without you trusting people that they would deliver on their word, they would do what they say would do, they would do, and they would take on board everything that you say. So courageous vulnerability is the modern day strength that leaders are required to have so that you can lead authentically and integrally in this day and age. Guess what? If you are not allowing yourself to be vulnerable, or if you don't accept that you have mistakes, you have flaws, what happens? You try to hide them, you try to cover them up, you try to overlook them. And that does not go well for leading others and directing others and supporting others to up level or to be lifted or creating other leaders. Hence why it's important that you're courageous in being vulnerable and accepting your flaws, accepting others as they are. So if this is the case, here are some things that I want to share with you, with regards to being vulnerable or trusting, and maybe some tips. Are you still thinking about the question? Do you trust yourself? And if you did, what would be possible for you to achieve if you did? Perhaps it's not just trusting yourself. How about trusting others? But answer that question for yourself first. Do you trust yourself? And what possibilities can you begin to see in your life if you did? I hope that you can get some information that will help you answer that. So, in terms of what are some of the lessons I want to leave with you, and that's some of the lessons are: I want you to continue to be self-aware, to live consciously daily. Not having all the answers does not disqualify you. You learn to trust yourself to do what it takes to succeed. So basically, you won't have all the answers. We never have all the answers. But that shouldn't stop you from living courageously. But the more self aware you are, the more you can trust yourself because you're self aware, you know your flaws, then you take action to address them. Like I said, if you don't trust yourself, you won't invest in yourself to grow. You will keep looking for ways of making excuses because you don't trust yourself to get to the level that you want to get to. Trust is the currency for relationship, and that is relationship with yourself as well. So live consciously daily so that you can understand how your actions and behaviors are leading you towards more of trusting yourself or less of trusting yourself because you are not following through with actions. So if you're procrastinating and not doing what you need to do, guess what? What happens? You won't trust yourself to ever do something bigger. And if you have overcome procrastination, what did you learn from that lesson that you could use? The next one is nurture yourself to trust your intuition. And that is key. And when you nurture yourself, intuition, they say, is God speaking to us, and prayer is you speaking to God. So, nurturing yourself, when you are living consciously, you will get insights. You get aha moments, what they call aha moments. You get self awakening moments. You need to learn to trust those. I'm very intuitive, but I'm what you call, I use a lot of factors in my life, dreams, listening and watching people. I use all these things to my benefit. So the key to being able to trust more is learn to tune into your intuition and trust your intuition. It'll help you make decisions quicker. Tune into the emotions that you feel at certain times when you make decisions or when you come across people. But just don't tune into it, lean into it and understand why. And when you do, it might be prejudice and unconscious bias. This is where you make the unconscious conscious and you can address it because sometimes we mistrust people without facts. We just have this somewhere in the back of our head. People like this do this and that. Therefore, I am not going to trust them. And you have that unconscious bias going on, programming on the inside. The other thing to remember is that when people offend and hurt you, you have to tune into the emotions that you feel at that time and take control of them. So, as someone who has trained in the area of emotional intelligence and the scientific way that you can use it to coach, I've used it to coach myself through understanding the need to have that emotional, that resilience to bounce back when people have hurt you, so important. Understanding how you impact people with the ways that you behave and how they are impacting you and taking charge of how you feel about that at the moment, that's emotional mastery. That will help you to build better trust in yourself and in others. So you need a framework for your relationships and who you trust and don't trust. You need to know fully why, and so you can create the right boundaries. So when you create boundaries, you're more likely to trust, and you're more likely to trust yourself, but you're more likely to trust others who you can tell and you can show that you have boundaries and they're maintaining those boundaries. Because when you don't have boundaries, then you're open to being hurt. And when you get hurt and hurt and hurt, especially like I said for introverts, you withdraw and you stay within yourself. So when you know your boundaries, when you understand your limitations of what you can and cannot take, and you allow and give yourself permission to maintain those boundaries, I can guarantee you that trust begins to come into your life even more. Aside all of these are things that you can control. I want to tell you that what if you can control things? Then you're going to step into a space of allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So practice courageous trust. Courageously trust people, knowing that you have accepted, like the truths I've shared, that people are human and they will make mistakes even when they don't mean to, and some would mean to, let's be honest, and hurt you. Because ultimately, human beings are selfish. Selflessness is not what we're born with. Born with selflessness is what we acquire by conscious and intentional decisions that we make. So Hence, you will find that you will meet people along the path who will offend you, who will abuse the trust that you have in them. Should that stop you from trusting? You've got to weigh what you're missing out from trusting other people versus what you have lost from trusting that person. It might not be a big thing, but it's bigger when you can't trust so many other people that will come along your path for the rest of your life just because you have had abuse of trust by one person or a few people in the world. So I want you to practice courageous trust. So remember that every resolve is tested. So when you practice, you don't even know your strength until you test it. So when you are practicing courageous mistrust, I have said it in one of my posts where I said that there is a quote by one of my mentors, Joyce Meyer. She says, "If you pray to God and say, 'Oh, I really want to be a nice, loving person that loves the whole world,' you will start getting people who are difficult to love because they are sitting at your table eating with you and you know they are going to betray you. So that is the test of love, because love is an action, it's not just a feeling. So it's trying to test your resolve, whether you truly want to be a loving person, and you have to scale it. So we've just been through Easter and we know that Judas Iscariot was earmarked as the person who betrayed Jesus. And if you look at through the course of the journey, some of the statements he made, he was never really fully on Jesus' side. But Jesus kept him still close. He had 12 disciples he called, and his role in their lives was to mentor and to lead them and to show them, including the bad seeds among them. Because even the good seeds did betray him in the end, or did abandon him in his time of need. So when you practice courageous trust, remember that your resolve will be tested. And when it is tested, when you have had emotional mastery and emotional intelligence and worked on your leadership ability, self leadership, you will be able to get back, you will bounce back, you'll be resilient, and you will grow. And you will be able to step into that next scary level that many people won't get to because they won't be willing to practice what you're practicing. So, trust and vulnerability are necessary for you to find love. And this could be loving yourself, loving others, and loving the divine, God. So trust and vulnerability are definitely, and none of us, the essential ingredient we all need for survival in the world, every single one of us is love. So if you cannot live without love, you've got to work on trusting, and you've got to work on allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Because if it's no use for you to erect barricades and fences around you, living in a comfort zone you have created to stay away from being hurt and being vulnerable and hiding, while you are still hoping that at some time in your life you will see and experience the beauty that is all in you and, and blossoming from within. If you create barricades and barriers in your life, you fail to experience your full potential, the beauty that is within you that needs to blossom. So think about it. I want to give you a nice picture here to paint, and it's that of a flower and a rose, and how delicate it is. When you touch a rose, the petals break. But when a rose is very tightly closed like this, the tendency it is stronger and the petals don't fall off quickly. But it's less beautiful to when it blooms. And when it blooms and opens up, it's vulnerable. Of course, the vulnerability includes attracting bees who will come and, nestle in the insides of it. It could mean that it can be subject to more viruses or whatever getting into it, but it looks beautiful blooming. So think about it that way, that if you're meant to bloom, you cannot do that without allowing yourself to open up and bloom. And in so doing, you are more vulnerable. A rose petal that is blooming is more likely to lose its petals, isn't it? So, hi, A1 Day, thanks for joining. So, you need to allow yourself to bloom. If this really resonates with you, I would love to help you further. If you feel that you want to have a chat, you want to talk about how you have limited yourself based on not trusting, not letting yourself be vulnerable, and you don't know how to do it or what you could do to help yourself. You want to find a safe space where you can bloom and blossom and achieve your full potential. Then I would like to get in touch with you to get in touch with me so that we can talk about it. And if I'm a fit to help you, I can help you, especially if you're an introverted woman. You know, you have challenges as a woman that makes you even feel vulnerable. Women can feel vulnerable for many, many reasons. Add on top of that your sensitivity, being highly sensitive as an introvert, you will struggle with trust and you will struggle with allowing yourself be vulnerable or allow yourself be taken advantage of. So you want to have conversations so that you can bloom because you are meant to open up and bloom. So I want to leave you finally with this quote by Rumi. I love it a lot. And it says this: your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Right? I'll read that again. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. So lack of trust builds barriers. Refusal to be vulnerable so that you can be authentic, your authentic self can build a barrier. And this barrier stops you from moving to your next level. So, your work in answering that first question, what is it again? Do you trust yourself? Is to look at all the barriers that are stopping you from really trusting yourself so you can bet on yourself, so you can take the risk that you need to take, so you can move forward. I hope that you have enjoyed this time together that we've spent. I hope that you have picked up some nuggets from it. It's a longer session than I usually do, but I wanted to share some insights with you and to share my experience. So, how has it been? You would ask me, how has it been? It's been harrowing in some instances, but out of that harrowing experience of maybe trusting people and experiencing betrayal, I've learned a lot about myself that makes me know my strength. And that is was not something I thought was going to happen, but is key to me stepping into my leadership role. It's been very exciting to understand and to see that. And again, it's interesting when you are operating in a space of self-awareness and self-empowerment, you find peace. And I feel more peaceful and even more driven to bring the visions that I have to life. So I can tell you that it is something that you should pursue to work on trusting God if you're a person of faith, trusting yourself, and trusting others. You will find people to trust. The more you're more open to trust people, the more you find people to trust. But the more you develop strategies to know how to create a framework for relationships for those that you need to avoid. So I want to wish you all the very best. I want to say thank you for taking part, for sharing the time with me. When you watch this, I would love you to connect. And also, if you've missed this or you want to watch this again, rather than look for it all over because it's being shown on LinkedIn and on Facebook, you can find it on my YouTube channel, which I'll put the link to. And if you subscribe, there are more exciting things to come. Myself and guests will be sharing insights and empowerment that will help you turn your aspirations into transformation. I want to wish you the very best and to say, if you don't have anybody around you rooting for you, I am rooting for your success. I'm sending you positive vibes for success for this year to transform this year. So take care and God bless.